Hello everyone, this is Andrew. Welcome to Keen on America. On July 4th, 2026, America will be 250 years old. An anniversary that will, no doubt, be greeted with a mixture of celebration, contemplation, and resignation. In Keen on America, we talk to prominent US citizens not just about their country's past and present, but also about its future. What, I ask my American guests, will be the 21st century fate of their now venerable republic? Hello everybody, welcome back to Keen on America. Today we are in Western Virginia at Polyface Farm. The farm of my guest, Joel Salatin, one of America's leading regenerative farmers. And as always on Keen on America, I began my conversation with Joel Salatin by asking him where and when he was born.
I'm Joel Salatin. I was born in Worcester, Ohio in 1957.
Actually, sorry, 1 second. Let's start that again. Why don't you do it again?
Okay. I'm Joel Salatin. I was born in Worcester, Ohio in 1957.
Joel, would you describe yourself as a troublemaker? In your store, on your farm, one of the notebooks has a quote from you: "Everything I want to do is illegal."
Yes, and of course my handle is the Lunatic Farmer. You know, what surprises a lot of my, people that like me is that a lot of people in the conventional farming community, even right here in the neighborhood, have literally to my face called me a bioterrorist, typhoid Mary. They have these terminologies for me.
And that's when they're trying to be nice.
Well, they're not trying to be nice. They're trying to explain. They're trying to put me in my place and explain. Look, we don't endorse what we're not buying what you're selling, and that's now obviously there's a lot of other people that think I have some good ideas, but for the conventional farming community, I'm very much a threat. I mean, and they're not evil. You got to realize that these folks that say that, they have farms, and they really believe. They really believe. That's why I don't bag them. I don't think badly of them. They really believe that because I don't vaccinate, medicate, eradicate, adulterate my cows or chickens or whatever, that they're going to get sick, and then they're going to take that sickness to their farm, and they're going to lose their third, fourth, fifth generation farm in some cases because I am so negligent, obtuse, name your thing, typhoid Mary, bioterrorist, that they're going to lose their farm for me. So this is real, and these are wonderful people. But we're on different planets when it comes to how we steward the land, steward the animals, and actually produce food.
Joel, you and I are talking at Polyface Farm in deepest rural, beautiful Virginia. I'm staying actually in Charlottesville, about an hour away, and this morning I went to Monticello, and one of the things that I noted was that Jefferson himself, in his own way, was a revolutionary farmer. In what you're doing in the radical ideas on regenerative agriculture, do you see yourself in some way as quintessentially American?
Oh, absolutely. I think we embody here the most basic principles of liberty and freedom that Jefferson so wrote for. I mean, the fact that we now have a government that wants to require mandatory vaccination of cows, mandatory animal identification, radio frequency identification collars, that a government that that subsidizes 6 commodities to the exclusion of everything else. I'm not asking for anything else to be subsidized. I'm just saying it's an interventionist thing. And Jefferson actually wrote quite a bit, enough that we know that he was understanding food is an ultimate liberty, the ability to produce your food, to sell it, the fact that I can't, make sausage on our farm, or hot dogs, or charcuterie, and sell it to my neighbors, or make a meat pie and sell it to friends at church, he would have said, well, I thought King George was bad. This is even worse. and that's exactly where we are. And so, yes, I see myself very much in that 1776 spirit of aggressively militating against, I haven't taken up arms yet, but certainly philosophically militating against and challenging the philosophies of our current government, which I do believe is very similar to what was going on in history.
In other words, everything I want to do is illegal. Tell me your story, Joel. You were born on the land, right?
Well, I wasn't born here. I was.
You mean on Polyface?
No, I wasn't born here on the farm that we're I have to. I'm quick to say that some of my politics has been framed by our experience. So my dad was in the Navy in World War II, flew in the Navy in World War II, got out, went to Indiana University on the GI Bill, and from even a teenager at that time, so this is late 1930s, he was already seeing the slide of the U.S. towards socialism, fascism, and which has come a long way since. But he was seeing it then. That's why Ayn Rand wrote Atlas Shrugged at that time. And he said, I want to go to a developing country. I don't a new frontier, a new totally open market where there isn't so much bureaucracy. And so he kind of set his sights on South America as a new frontier, as a land of opportunity. Land was cheaper, and so he said, "How can I? I don't have any land. I don't have any money. I don't. How do I start?" So he said, "I'll get a high-paying job and get down there and save a bunch of money, and I can buy a farm," which is exactly what he did. So he went. He finished in as a major in business administration, economics. Went to Middlebury in Vermont for a semester to learn Spanish. Hitchhiked from Vermont to Mexico. Spent 6 months with a family there. Came back, sat for the Foreign Civil Service exam in Spanish, passed it the first go, and got on as a bilingual accountant with Texas Oil Company, where they were drilling for oil off the coast of Venezuela at that time. This was the beginning of OPEC. This is 1940, 48, 49. And they wanted bilingual accountants because the workers were Venezuelans and the administrators were Americans, and the conflicts were always about money. So they wanted the guy that made the paychecks, handled the company store and all that. They wanted him to be a bilingual. So it was a very narrow, a narrow vocation and actually a very narrow span of time. But in 7 years, he was able to earn enough money to buy a 1,000-acre farm in the highlands of Venezuela, and we moved out there. And he had these two boys coming on, my brother and I. My brother's 3 years older, and we began farming out there. Those Latin American markets, the farmers bring their stuff into the market square, and the middlemen, the vendors, come and they buy from the farmers, and then they peddle it through the city. This is early 1950s. There's not a lot of electricity, so people bought literally from vendors who we in America we have the ice cream man. There everything came. There wasn't a Walmart, a Costco, a Kroger. So you bought bananas from the banana man. You bought pineapples from the pineapple man. You bought chickens from the chicken man. Well, Dad's goal, he said, what they really need here is dairy and chicken. Well, chicken was, quick turnover, a lot easier to get into, so we started raising chickens, and all the indigenous chickens there had kind of a subtherapeutic pneumonia because they were so raised in such filth and unsanitary conditions, open sewers, squat pots in the village, stilts and all that, and the chickens are running through, and so they all had this kind of little snot. It was the drainage from their nostril, and that determined the price of the chickens. The cleaner the beak was, the cleaner the nostril, the higher the price of the chicken. So everybody was trying to get a cleaner chicken. And of course, the senoras who bought the chicken, they knew about this, and so when the guy came with the chickens live on a pole, she'd go out and run her fingers down the beaks to see which ones were drier, and then she'd offer to pay more for the ones that were dry. And so anyway, our chickens were clean and they were dry. I mean, dry. And so in no time, here this gringo, this expat American, literally takes over the entire local chicken market. Well, the other farmers, they didn't come and ask, Senor Salatin, porque, how do you do these chickens? They accused us of voodoo and witchcraft and black magic, and resented us taking the market from them. And so when a junta broke out in 1959 against Pérez Jiménez, what happens when you have anarchy like that? It allows scores to be settled that wouldn't be settled otherwise. And so we were sitting ducks out there. We were not Venezuelans, not natives certainly, and we had supposedly wronged these local farmers, and so basically they used the junta to give cover to exact their vengeance. And so the machine guns came in the back door as we fled the front door, and we lost everything. And
so Joel, you're not the first to be small entrepreneurs to be, as you say, sitting ducks in a place like Venezuela, but what distinguishes you is your creativity when it comes to agriculture. Was your father as radical an agriculturalist as yourself?
Dad was more, he came to the environmental element of agriculture through economics. He saw chemicals, the whole chemical from herbicide to chemical fertilizer and everything. He saw it as a drug addiction. You were on this rat race, and you were trying to get ahead of biology and nature's pattern, and you were just chasing yourself all the time, and you never could get ahead of it. And so he came to, what's fascinating about our story, I think, is because he came to this from an economic standpoint, which lots of times people think economics and environmentalism are in tension. You've got to give one to have the other. But his dad, my grandfather, was a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine when it first came out in 1945, and he completely embraced the composting, non-chemical approach to agriculture. Dad got that kind of philosophy from him, bolstered it with his economics degree as he was looking at this, and realized there's got to be a natural pattern to get this done, and that's exactly what we brought here.
So would it be fair to describe regenerative agriculture? You're a pioneer of it. Your name is often associated with regenerative farming in the United States. Would it be fair to say that it's defined by its opposition to chemicals on the land, or is it something more perhaps philosophical about the idea and the ideal of the earth, of the soil?
I think, obviously you've got negative and positive, and of course most isms have something that you're against and something that you're for, and so yes, there is definitely a rejection of poison in all of its forms, from genetically modified organisms to chemical fertilizers to glyphosate and everything else. But then there's this wonderful embrace of the positive, which is building up the commons. So we're building up the soil. The commons is what nobody can actually own. It's owned collectively. And I know, as a libertarian like me, to use the word commons, that's not supposed to happen, but it's true. There is commons, the streams, the creeks, that we didn't put them there. They're there before us and hopefully after us. And so what regenerative agriculture, or I'm trying to use the word healing agriculture, what it does is it embraces that because of my being here, there's going to be more soil, there's going to be more water, there's going to be cleaner air, breathable air, all of these virtues and assets of the commons are going to increase as a result of my being here.
You were an early pioneer. I guess all pioneers, Joel, are early, but you were an early pioneer of this idea of regenerative agriculture. Are you surprised with how fashionable it's becoming now?
I don't know that it's. There's certainly more awareness of it. But listen, as long as Chick-fil-A and McDonald's are still building restaurants, it hasn't, in my view, become fashionable. We're still a tiny part of the food system. I mean, like less than 5%. So I'm not ready. I'm not ready to say we're anywhere close to winning. In fact, there are huge indications that we haven't even received the greatest challenges yet with artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things and eminent domain to take farmland, to put 5G towers, to monitor every square foot of farmland, to beam it into a database. You know, those kinds of things are not. Trust me, the people that are running those systems do not embrace anything that I espouse in agriculture or the regenerative agriculture movement. If you have a sick chicken and you put it in the database to find out what the AI tells you're supposed to do with this chicken, it's never going to say, oh, put the chicken outside on pasture, let it get some green grass and fresh air, and that's probably the best way to raise it. No, it'll be a litany of pharmaceuticals and hormones and whatever else has to be done in order to keep them in a confinement house living on fecal particulate air. That's going to be the system.
Joel, is the problem big ag or is the problem capitalist agriculture?
The problem, normally we would say problems, but I would say two things are the problem. I can't say one is greater than the other. One problem is, of course, government intervention in agriculture. And that includes a food pyramid in 1979 that put Cheerios and cookies on the bottom of the pyramid as the foundation of nutrition, and you can track our obesity epidemic. You could say it's when Reagan and Teddy Kennedy absolved all the pharmaceutical companies of liability, said no matter what happens, nobody can sue you for liability anymore, and that just exploded the whole pharmaceutical industry, vaccines, all those kinds of things, and so there is and then you have the whole food regulations, the inability of an entry level, because you can track it. I mean, look, Don Tyson, Frank Perdue, Bob Evans, all these icons of the mega food industry today, all of them started in the 1930s and 40s on the tailgate of a pickup truck. Today, everything that they started with is illegal. And so that government intervention into the marketplace, albeit sincere, has actually inhibited, if not prohibited and precluded, the entry level of entrepreneurs that can solve all these problems. Salmonella, E. coli, all these things can be solved with biology, with better management. They don't need chemicals. They don't need vaccines. They certainly don't need pharmaceuticals, drugs. But so many of us know how to solve all these problems, but we're inhibited from getting to the marketplace because of these scale prejudicial food safety regulations. So those completely manipulate the market and keep healthy alternatives from getting there. So you have that aspect. The other problem is simply the propensity of all of us for convenience and apathy. We love our routine. There's nothing more routine than a routine, and there's nothing harder to break than a routine. And so when you buy the government, expertise that get rid of butter and lard and use hydrogenated vegetable oil, get rid of compost and use chemicals, feed dead cows to cows. I mean the track record of the government dietary and agriculture experts is abysmal. And why anybody believes them still, I have no idea. But that's what we've grown up on, and now as a modern as a culture, since World War II, or you can say since a little bit before then, and so people have grown up on Coca-Cola, Velveeta squeezable cheese, Hot Pockets, Lunchables, and that convenience. We don't eat together anymore. People don't know how to cook. They don't know culinary expertise. And so as a culture, we've completely abdicated a participatory mandate in the food system. And the fact is, you cannot have an integrity food system, and that goes all the way back to the soil and the earthworms. You cannot have an integrity food system and be this profoundly absent from domestic culinary participation. And so I see the government, I see apathy and convenience as the two big things.
There's apathy, Joel, there's convenience, and what about price? A lot of people are fearful of regenerative agriculture because they think, maybe rightly or wrongly, that it's more expensive. You mentioned Coca-Cola and McDonald's. There's a perception, perhaps wrong, that the stuff sold in McDonald's is cheap. Is that correct? Is that a fair criticism of regenerative agriculture, that it would result if every farm in America went regenerative and began to redevelop its relationship with the soil and farmed in a less industrial manner, that food would become more expensive?
Well, realize several elements to this. Number one, one of the reasons that our food is more expensive is because of these prejudicial things. I mean, for example, in the last 4 years, we've only been able to get back about 10% of our livers from the slaughterhouse because the inspector's never seen grass-finished liver, and she's throwing out all the grass-finished livers from everybody that brings in beef because it has a green patina, and she's never seen a green patina in a feedlot grain-finished beef, so she says the livers are bad. So here we are, we're losing $25,000 a year. And we're just one farm. Multiply that by all the other farms that are trying to do grass-fattened beef, and you have huge amounts of losses in our sector. So these regimented requirements in the food inspection system that are scale prejudicial. I mean, at the slaughterhouse where we use in the region here, it costs us about $600 to do to, for example, a beef carcass, what Iowa Beef Packers or JBS does for about $150. And that's not because it takes that's nothing to do with the actual processing. It's the prejudicial scale and I would say, I've been to congressional hearings, on this and listened to, and I've testified to Congress about these problems, and you have the Food Safety Inspection Service commissioner standing up there saying, boy, we've been so efficient that we have eliminated most of the small slaughterhouses, and now an inspector can see more pounds of meat, per hour because all the slaughterhouses are great big. And it makes you want to throw up because I thought they were there to make sure that the food was safe, not that the small plants go out of business. But that's exactly what's happened, and so that creates an artificial high price. That's my point. It creates an artificial high price. If we actually had empirical science in the food inspection service, in other words, if it's clean, it's clean. Doesn't matter how many pounds of concrete, how many toilets for employees. It doesn't matter. If it's clean, it's clean. If we actually had science instead of poke and sniff and bureaucrats and politics instead, we would see a much lower price and a much more competitive price edge on the alternative. But the next thing is that tax law incentivizes equipment and physical stuff as opposed to people. If I go out and abuse a tractor and have to replace it, I get to write all that off on my taxes. But if I hire a person, I have to submit to all sorts of your workman's comp, minimum wage, all sorts of issues, OSHA workplace requirements, all sorts of interventive measures that disincentivize me replacing machinery with people. And that's a perverse incentive. And so a farm like ours that is people-centric rather than machine-centric, because we're in the biological bit. Food is biology. Food is not mechanics. It's biology. And this is the problem in our food system, is we've come to it with a very Greco-Roman Western reductionist, segregated, linear, disconnected kind of thinking, and view food as fundamentally mechanical. No, food is fundamentally biological. And mechanics and biology are two very, very different things. And so what's happened is tax policy incentivizes mechanics over people. That's why, every business is trying to replace their people, right? It's not because they don't like people, it's because the code makes it much cheaper to get rid of people and move toward mechanics. And so that then moves a farm to a mechanical paradigm as opposed to a biological paradigm. And when that happens, then you have mechanical food, artificial food, which then makes artificial people with an immune system that is artificial and requires artificial pharmaceuticals and drugs to keep it going. That was basically the trajectory seen by Sir Albert Howard when he wrote an Agricultural Testament in 1943.
Joel, I'm here for an event you're putting on this summer, No Labels at Polyface Farms. You have a label. It may not be a conventional one. Why do you embrace the idea of no labels? What does that mean in your mind? I assume for you, not having a label is a good thing.
Yes, because too often when we just establish a label, organic certified, whatever, it eliminates the conversation. And one of the reasons that Dr. Sina McCullough and I wrote the book Beyond Labels was because we didn't want people to be satisfied with just a label. And it's not just a label at the supermarket. It's labels in people as well. You're labeled by your politics. You're labeled by your investments. You're labeled by your vocation. And so that's one reason that I took after several years and being pressed into a box that I felt like, I finally invented the Christian libertarian environmentalist capitalist lunatic farmer to just embrace and say, look, don't put me in a box. I've finished a speech and had somebody come up, man, you're the purest socialist guy I've ever heard. All the way to somebody else comes up and says, you're the purest libertarian I've ever heard. And so I think it's important to appreciate that as soon as you box somebody in or you stereotype, then the conversation gets over. And that's why we want to be beyond labels in order to get past just the stereotypes.
But everybody labels everyone else, and perhaps that's one of the problems with America. You've been labeled recently, Joel. You know this better than I do, as an anti-vaxxer, a bit crazy. Mm-hmm. The theme of your event this summer is detoxifying America. Mm-hmm. Is there a problem with modern science and vaccinations, or is that more of a thematic issue in terms of moving us away from a scientific food agricultural culture to something else?
I think there is something wrong with science today. Pure science is supposed to be objective, but what we have now, as soon as you delve into, let's just take the COVID vaccine. The evidence is coming out now. Huge reams of evidence now, and whistleblowers coming out showing how the trials were doctored. There was a definite strategy to exclude, negative things and beef up and put a light on the positive things, and it's very, very skewed. So in my perfect world, the government would not spend a dime on science. As soon as the government spends a dime on science, it becomes political, and that's exactly what's happened. Let businesses do it. Let it be out there.
No government oversight, Joel.
No, none. Zero.
Of medicine, of pill sold.
None whatsoever. The cure is worse than the disease.
How are people going to know if
because there will be all sorts of independent checkers. There can be Underwriters Laboratory and AAA of drugs, whatever. The most disempowering thing that anyone can ever say is the only solution is government oversight. That is the most personally disempowering thing that anyone can say. There are tons of things. Listen, when Teddy Roosevelt, I call him Teddy Rooseveltsky because he was a communist, when he established the Food Safety Inspection Service to appease the 7 big meat processors in America, who in 1906, 7 meat processors controlled 50% of the meat supply, and everybody said it was an oligarchy close to monopoly. They begged him to intervene. When Upton Sinclair wrote the book The Jungle in 1906, they lost 50% of their sales within 6 months of that book coming out. Where did people go? They went to their neighborhood butchers. They went to their local farmers. It was the largest localization of bringing the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker back to village scale and village authenticity that the country's ever seen. But it was very short-lived because he acquiesced, gave them the Food Safety Inspection Service, saying, yes, now we're going to get the government involved in telling you what is acceptable to eat. And now here we are a century later, a little more than a century later, and now we don't have 7 companies controlling 50% of the meat supply. We have 4 companies controlling 85%. That's what the government intervention does for you. So we desperately need to Uberize our food system. And by that, what I mean is we now have the internet. See, 500 years ago, the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker were embedded in the village community, and people who knew who the fraud was and who the artisan was, and they patronized them accordingly. Today, as the Industrial Revolution came through the 1800s into the 1900s, what happened? The butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker were not embedded in the village. They became great big corporations with chain link fence around them and guard towers and security fences. Well, when you have an industrial food system that's opaque, everybody naturally wonders, I wonder what's going on behind that fence. And so the industrial food system created the industrial oversight system, the federal bureaucracy of food safety inspection service. And so that's what developed. But with the internet now, we have recreated the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker with not a village voice, but a global voice with real-time ratings, so that if somebody puts out a bad chicken, a bad hamburger, bad something, listen, if people weren't dependent on the government to suss this out and took the politics out of it, then it would simply be raw data, raw information, and there would be watchdogs, private watchdog groups. I mean, I could join this watchdog group. I like what they're looking for, so I'm going to join them, and they're going to go in and sleuth and watch for me. And if somebody doesn't want them to come into their plant, well, I'm not going to buy food, that comes from that plant. And so there are all sorts of tremendous privatized solutions to government oversight, and I call this the Uberization of the food system. We now have an Uberized mentality where we can self-audit and self-check through the miracle of the internet. Same Airbnb. Who would have guessed that in fewer than 10 years, because of the internet, because of the feedback loop and the accountability in the quick real-time feedback loop, who would have guessed that in 10 years the world would have seen as much hospitality beds as Sheraton, Marriott, and Hilton combined without driving a nail? That's pretty cool. And that's what we need. It's in the hospitality industry. It's now, in the chauffeur industry. We need to take that technology and have the food system join the 21st century.
I don't want to labor this, Joel, but very briefly, are you suggesting then, for example, that the government shouldn't get involved in whether or not large companies, tobacco companies, can sell cigarettes? Are you suggesting that all drugs should be legal?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. But remember, along with my suggestion that you can sell tobacco, cigarettes, methamphetamine, and cocaine, at the same time, there is no government safety net, no Medicare, no Medicaid. If I want to build a hospital, I can build a hospital. I don't need a license to build a hospital. If I want a hospital for only atheist Vietnamese bow-legged people and only those people can come, fine. And if I want a hospital that only Christian, Baptists, whatever can, that's fine. What we've got right now is a cartel. We've got a fascist cartel that does not allow innovation, entrepreneurial innovation in the marketplace on almost anything. You almost have to get a license to pee, and so.
You can always pee by the road. I do.
Well, yeah, but if a cop happens to come by, he's going to arrest you for exposure in public. So, we have really lost we have lost our freedoms, and we've become serfs of the state. And yes, listen, when a government can get between my lips and my throat and tell me, when a government can tell me I can't take cocaine, it can also tell me I can't drink raw milk. And that's exactly what we've got. I'm not suggesting that people that want to regulate drugs are bad people. I know they're sincerely minded. But the road to hell is paved with sincere intentions.
But very briefly, Joel, and then I want to try and move on to the last couple of questions. Mm-hmm. In the internet age, who would stop large tobacco companies blowing out all their propaganda on social media, saying, "Oh, smoking's good for you," and cancer is an invention of the anti-big tobacco lobby? Who is ever going to be trusted in this world?
You know what? The most trusted people in my world are censored and demonized by the government and by the metaverse. And again, we're seeing the collusion between the government and social media as in a nefarious agenda to make sure that the people who would dare to oppose the tobacco company, I'll take your example, to oppose the tobacco company, can't see the light of day. I mean, Cena and I's a podcast, MailChimp canceled us. I mean, no, disinformation, canceled us. This is not disinformation. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., canceled, censored. What in my world, the freedom that the internet was given, that these are non-publishers, makes them a utility. And therefore, they can't censor anything. And if I want to put how to make a bomb on the internet, fine, put it on. Everybody will know who's making the bomb. Everybody knows to stay away from my house. The fear, to fear freedom, to fear freedom and liberty, and to say, well, we need this tyranny of fascism, this government corporate collusion, is just an incredibly disempowering kind of thinking, and it is why we are where we are, where the opposition can't get a fair shake, can't get a seat at the table.
Joe, your event this month is on detoxifying the soil, detoxifying the body. But more broadly, do you think there's a problem in America of toxification? Is America toxified and it needs radicals like yourself, troublemakers, to detoxify the country?
Yes, in fact, I would say that not only are we toxic to ourselves, we're toxic to much of the world. And if you start looking at what our CIA has done for the last 70 years, you'd realize, and I travel, I was just in Hungary and Austria, I travel around the world, and let me tell you, America is by the day becoming hated around the world, because we meddle. We're a typical, we're just like the Roman Empire, we're extending our grasp, trying to do our influence beyond our grasp, and we're meddling in everybody's stuff. And to tell an African Muslim country, we won't help you unless you adopt an LGBTQ agenda, for example, is disrespectful. It's dishonoring to their cultural norms, and we're doing this all over the world. Trust me, Vladimir Putin doesn't care what a country believes. If they can do a deal, they do a deal. He doesn't put any strings on what you have to believe spiritually or anything else. And so,
shall I just?
No, let's just let it ring. It'll stop in a minute. The machine will pick it up, but it's probably going to come in on the tape.
Yeah, well, you can sort of.
I'll
you can
start.
Pick up from the.
I'll pick up.
Thing.
Yeah, the machine will pick it up.
It's Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, it's the CIA.
Yeah. They're down the road, right?
Yeah, they are. They're very close. All right, that's it. So believe me, Vladimir Putin doesn't care the politics or the spirituality or of a country. If they can do a deal and he can get his foot in the door, he's ready to do it, put in the door. He doesn't put a bunch of strings on these kinds of things. And so when I travel, I always ask people when I go, when you think of food, every country has its little specialty, and when I ask, what do you think when I say food in America, and I'm in a foreign country, what do you think of as food in America? I have never had any answer except McDonald's. Now there's a reason why the U.S. leads the world. We're number one. Hey, the Olympics are coming up. We're all pulling for Simone Biles, and we want to have the best swimmer. We want to have the best, pole vaulter. It's fun to be number one as a country in things. That's great. But there's one thing you don't want to be number one in. You don't want to be number one in chronic, non-infectious morbidity. And we're number one. The U.S., of all the countries in the world, we're number one per capita in non-infectious chronic morbidity. I wonder if that is because we invented McDonald's, genetically modified organisms, DDT, glyphosate, Crisco. Go down the line. We invented this stuff, and this is nature coming back to us, basically on its knees, pleading, "Please stop, abusing me." And so, yes, toxins are all over now. Personally, from electromagnetic frequencies to, toxins in our food, toxins in the air with chemtrails, whatever. I don't know what all everybody's going to talk about, but we are surrounded by toxins, and including toxic think. And so we need to work on all those toxins.
Are you suggesting that the more toxins we digest, we eat, we drink, the more toxic we become, and that may be one of the reasons why the 2 or 3 or 4 Americas can't talk to one another?
That is certainly an interesting theory. I'm not sure it's been proven empirically, but I will tell you that as a poet philosopher, I'm a word guy, and it just makes sense to me. So this is not, I don't have any proof here, but it just makes sense to me that if you are ingesting life that has been grown under abuse and stress and violence, that perhaps that comes into you. By the same token, if you eat plants and animals that have been grown with the caress of love and a habitat that allows them to fully express their tomato-ness and their pigness and their chickenness, so that they're happy, that also comes through. The only thing that I have that's kind of anywhere close to scientific on this is that for many years we've serviced many good quality chefs, and what's interesting is that they tell us that our meats, we're in the meat business, not in the vegetable, but we grow some vegetables for ourselves, but we don't sell them much. When they cook our meats, all of our stuff cooks about 15%, even up to 20% faster than the conventional. Well, why could that be? I would suggest that the average, let's take animal, factory farmed, Tyson chicken houses, Smithfield hog factories, massive beef feedlots, massive dairies, that these animals are under such a stressful condition that they secrete drip of adrenaline. Adrenaline is how you handle stress. I mean, that's how a 100-pound mom can pick up a 2,000-pound car off her, toddler. But what adrenaline does is it tightens up our muscles, and so our animals here never go through stress. They're happy. They're in a habitat that respects and honors their glory, their physiological and phenotypical distinctiveness. And so they're actually happy. So I actually think you can eat happiness and you can eat violence. And so the proposition that is part of the bifurcation of our culture and the enmity that we see, could it be because we're ingesting violence? I mean, we are respecting each other the way we respect a chicken in a Tyson chicken house, which is zero respect. All it is an inanimate pile of protoplasm to be grown faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper, however hubris can imagine to do it. And when we do that to the least of these in life, it's not a far stretch to say, well, then we can do it to the greatest of these, which is Tom and Mary and Dick and Henry. We can do it to the greatest of these. And so I would suggest that our ethics and our morality and our emotional, relational foundation is created by the philosophy with which we view life.
Some critics have suggested that our age of anxiety, a world in which more and more young people are suffering a mental illness, is a consequence of social media and technology and the internet. But Joel, are you suggesting that perhaps this plague, this epidemic of anxiety in the early 21st century may also be connected with how we eat?
I think there's no question. The more we study, for example, the microbiome, we're seeing more and more connection between the gut and the head, the emotion, what we would call the seat of your digestion to the seat of your heart, or your emotions. We're seeing that connection, and it's being brought out every day as being more amazing than we ever imagined. And so, yes, if your gut is screaming from dysfunction, very soon your mental condition, your emotions, your mental state is going to be screaming from that. That said, I agree completely that the social media phenomenon has certainly colored our youthful whatever, our youthful mental state, our problems. I would suggest that how a child develops self-worth. Look, if you look at the school shootings, every single one of those boys that's done a school shooting, every single one of them felt unloved, bullied, unappreciated, and misfit. They did not have self-worth. They thought they were not worth anything, and I'm going to show them I can do something. How do you develop self-worth in a child? And I'm going way back, here 3 years old, 2 years old. How do you develop self-worth? I would suggest, and I'm not a child psychologist, so take this with a grain of salt, But I would suggest that it is successfully accomplishing meaningful tasks. That's how you develop self-worth, dignity. You develop a sense of identity and who you are. Successfully accomplishing meaningful tasks. And one of our problems in our culture today is we do not incentivize in the family, we don't incentivize in the schools, we don't incentivize in society children actually successfully accomplishing meaningful tasks. And when that happens, they are rudderless, they are anchorless, and they don't have a sense of self-worth and dignity. And they take this into adulthood when they can really do some damage. So yeah, I think there's certainly a connection with food, but I also think there is a social connection in this social media addiction that we're seeing right now.
Joel, you've been very generous with your time. A couple more questions and I'll let you go. America, as you know, will be celebrating its 250th anniversary in a couple of years. We began this conversation with you talking about how intrinsically American you feel. Will you be celebrating in 2026? Do you think that America is in a good state? Should we be celebrating?
Oh, absolutely. Listen, there has never been a country like this. And listen, does that mean that we don't have our flaws? Absolutely, we have our flaws. Every place has its flaws. But from all you have to do is travel around the world, and I've encountered, because I'm a bit of a rebel in some of these things. I've gotten into into countries like Australia and things, and realized that they don't. I say, well, can't you do this? Well, we don't have a Bill of Rights. We don't have a Bill of Rights, and you find that all over the world. They don't have a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights in America is an unbelievable set of rules and documents to live by, and I love this country. And the reason that I'm so aggressive about decrying what I consider to be the things that have hurt this country is because I love it so much. Yes, I stand for the flag. When we have the July 4th parade and the veterans come by, I'm just sobbing with tears. I'm a little bit of a crybaby anyway. Chick flicks, I even cry at those. I love poetry and I love theater and drama, storytelling. I get all that, and so yes, I'm very American. But the America that we have today is not the America we had in 1800, not even 1900, and I'm not. Again, we've done plenty of wrong things, but the basic ideas of liberty, the basic ideas of small government. You can't have small business and big government. Those kinds of ideas are just bedrock American, and I'm all in.
Final question, Joel. What does America need to accomplish in the next 50 years? Some people would say that there's still a great challenge when it comes to race. We began this conversation talking about Thomas Jefferson of Montecito, his agricultural innovation, which was for the time remarkable, and yet it was built on slave labor, on people who weren't given the choice whether or not they wanted to work. What, in your view, is the biggest challenge for America in the 50 years after 2026? Is it still race and the legacy of slavery? Is it big agriculture, big tech? Is it the two-party political system? What would you like to be fixed between 2026 and 2076?
If I had to boil it down to one thing I would like to see fixed, it is a Bill of Rights, in addition to the Bill of Rights, that would give every citizen the right to food choice from the source of their choice. Right now, we don't have that. And what can be more personal, what can be more personally human agency than being able to choose the fuel for my microbiome? If the government can tell us what to eat, it can determine our fuel to energize us to go whatever, pray, preach, and shoot, you know. And if we could ever get this country as excited about food choice as we are about gun choice or some of these other choices, we would have a different country. But somehow, and I don't know all those. I don't know the reasons. I don't know why food keeps getting pushed to the background. I wish somebody would tell me why we can't get as excited about it as we get excited about other choice issues. But that's where we need to go as a nation. And if we ever get there, we will have a new freedom and a new opportunity and new environmental care and nutrient density like we've never seen before.